Hi Becky, here is my third vlog. So in this one, I really am just going to be focusing on just a single article again, mostly because I found it to be really interesting and maddening at the same time. The Thayer article, The Social Justice, A Conservative Perspective, was an article that I was really excited to read, being someone who is decidedly not conservative on basically any issue at all, and someone who really does believe that pretty much 90% of the conservative, well, if not all of the conservative values and agenda kind of go against what social work is. When I first read the article, in the initial part of the reading, it really kind of was a bit shocking to me because it really pointed out how different we are today in our politics and policies than we were in 2010 when this article was created. I found myself initially, when looking at the way in which this person gave a definition of conservatism, I kind of rolled my eyes for a minute, forgetting the year that this was written, because I was like, that's not what conservative is. And it kind of really initially turned me off from the whole article, because I was like, it just doesn't make any sense anymore, because the way in which they're describing conservative ideology might technically be correct, but I don't think is anywhere close to reflecting what conservative politics and Republican politics have become. Once I kind of remembered and consider the context that, again, this was written in 2010, I kept going, but was pretty quickly just kind of like, wow, this is not as strong as I thought it was going to be, or I wanted it to be. I thought a lot of the argumentation was quite weak, especially when it was talking about the idea of the forgotten man, the person that, the supposed middle class person who's being extra burdened in order to support poor people and things of that nature. In my undergrad, my background was, I majored in philosophy, and so one of the things that we talked about was, this article made me think of, is the principle of marginal utility. And so, essentially it's the idea that 10% of income for someone who is making minimum wage, relative to 10% of income of a millionaire, the effect that it has is very different. And so even when they're talking about how, like, poor people supposedly aren't paying any taxes, which in a lot of places around the country simply isn't true, because, like, for example, the state of Washington has sales tax. So, like, anywhere that has sales tax, poor people are contributing, one. And two, even if poor people aren't contributing, it's because they don't have anything to contribute because they're trying to survive. And so comparing that to this conversation of people who are more wealthy and complaining about how essentially they are being oppressed, because they're having to pay for things in society, I just thought it was a really weak argument, because they're not really being stolen from them. Nothing's being taken from them. Because if you're looking at, again, the principle of marginal utility, like, in the context of the amount of wealth that they have, paying higher taxes is not having an effect on their quality of life or their well-being, which I think is really the important part when we're talking about, what oppression is. Oppression's affecting quality of life, and the way in which the article, I think, describes the forgotten man, like, their quality of life isn't really being negatively impacted. So yeah, that was just kind of the main thing, is, and then as the article went on, it kind of just strengthened the ideas of that conservative policies just really are inherently antithetical to the work of social work, and the values of social justice. Which is a little, just disheartening, and maybe there's some other article, and if you happen to have any other articles or know of any articles that kind of try and tackle the same issue of conservatism in social work, that would be really great, because I really would like to read more. But it just kind of, after reading this article and writing all kinds of notations about all kinds of things, I remember there was a section, let me find it. There was a section that talked about like the fraud that was happening, and in like the way that it was so incredibly manipulative, because at one section it talked about how it like there was an error that I think was so grave that essentially in one section it talked about like fraud happening in like the millions, and then all of a sudden it said that fraud was happening in the billions. Well, oh yeah, and then now when I'm looking at it again, reminded of the guy basically complaining that because he was a white dude, he wasn't able to be in charge of the NASW, or like run for a official position, because they wanted the population to reflect the leadership to reflect the population. And the way he complained about that, there was just so much about this. And it just, there was just so much. And so I think that it talked about how all of a sudden there was 60 million to 92 million was paid by medical services or equipment that had been ordered or prescribed by dead doctors. And then it all of a sudden talks about 60 billion in fraud. There was just a lot to this article that I thought was really problematic, and it was pretty disappointing. Anyways, I will see you this evening in class.